Hi there, people. This is Marshall Trace Crypto, and I'm here to talk about a little thing I found in the Cosmos ecosystem not too long ago. Um, just to give you bit of a background, by day I'm a cloud software engineer working on e-procurement platforms within the hospitality and generally just the e-commerce sort of sector, and we tend to use sort of cloud solutions. We've been all over the place. We've sort of used Google's cloud provider services. We've used AWS from Amazon. We've used Azure from Microsoft. And the common theme we're seeing across all of these services is a thing called vendor lock-in. And all credit to them, these services are getting to a point where, honestly, when you've been developing on said platform for X number of years, you sort of become so accustomed to the services that they offer that vendor lock-in isn't necessarily the worst thing. Where it does get a bit technically tricky is when prices start to increase. When prices start to increase, it gets really scary, specifically in the software industry. Purely just down to, again, the amount of refactoring work that needs to sort of go into into the code bases to remove very specific, let's say, service or vendor specific solutions, and yeah, it just becomes tricky. So what we're seeing at this point in time is a lot of the cloud providers offering sort of serverless solutions. These tend to be sort of functions that you can deploy to the cloud, and they'll be run on sort of trigger alerts. And what that allows you to do is essentially completely get rid of the rack, i.e. the server, and create more functional and I don't know how to describe it in sort of layman's terms, but it allows you to take an approach where you don't need to have a monolith of a system. You have essentially just a small chunk of code that does a very small operation, and you put that in a cloud function, and whenever it's needed, it's run, it does what it needs to do, and yeah, that's it. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. But what's interesting is I was having a look around the Cosmos ecosystem not probably about 3 or 4 days ago, and I noticed this thing called AKT, and it had me intrigued. So as you can see here, I've not got much of it. We've only got 11.12. I am going to be progressively taking the rewards out of Osmosis, because currently I'm getting about 4 Osmo a day, and it's currently priced at about $4, so therefore I'm getting roughly about 11 AKT a day. So, sorry, that's completely wrong. 6 AKT a day, and I'm essentially going to stack this, just get a few hundred, 100 of them on the go, and then just sort of leave it. And the reason I'm thinking of leaving this is, as I say, I went across to sort of the Akash Network sort of website to just generally work out what it was, what they offer, what they do, what they're planning, teams behind it, all that sort of general stuff, that you tend to do just as ad hoc investment sort of things, just to, I know people throw money at anything these days, but typically, unless I know and understand what I'm investing in, I typically try to stay as clear as possible. Sorry, as far away as possible from the projects. Might sound terrible, but yeah. So yeah, as I say, Akash Network is essentially trying to, I wouldn't say necessarily solve the problem of centralized cloud providers, but what they are essentially trying to do is create a censorship-resistant, permissionless, self-governed, sovereign, open source cloud. And what's interesting about this is we recently seen, again, politics aside, we recently seen Amazon sort of stamping its foot down on, I can't remember what the application was called. It was that conservative US based website that allowed conservatives to talk. Again, politics aside, I'm not necessarily, again, I don't necessarily know what was posted up there. I didn't really follow the news, but at the end of the day, Amazon had the power just to basically just go, and it's off the internet, and I don't like that. And I think a lot of the people that are in this sort of community of specifically decentralized anything can sort of appreciate that no one should have that choice. I mean, it gets complicated when especially when it gets to certain content, but at the same time, no one should be able to ban you from the internet. And when I was having a look through the documentation on this, it was starting to really resonate, because in a lot of sort of these YAML files, especially around the deployment aspects of the code itself to the cloud, this is exactly what we do within sort of the Azure ecosystems, the AWS ecosystems, and again even the Google ecosystems. Like, YAML's just the preferred way of expressing what sort of deployment environment you want, what compute units you need, what resources you might need, all that fun stuff. And it was quite interesting to see how similar an approach has been taken to a completely decentralized version of these public clouds. As you can see here, the first sort of thing is just like define your application, package your application in a container and expose the TCP/IP ports that you need. Essentially specify the resource requirements, as said about the compute units. So we're specifying that we need a CPU of 0.1 units. Again, I haven't went too far into the actual technical detail here, which I'll show you in a minute, to actually really understand what 0.01 of a CPU unit actually means. But I think we all can understand again that 512 megabytes of memory is half a gigabyte of memory, and you can see again storage. So there seems to be quite a cool sort of thing going on here, where you can actually request complete server compute units, which is quite interesting in my opinion. And yeah, the last sort of thing is you set a price, and all the providers essentially bid to try and gain the work that is being sort of offered to the network. And because of the auction mentality, and this is what I quite like about this, it's evident that it's going to drive price down, instead of the centralized cloud providers having this sort of monopoly on it. And considering they are the ones with the compute power, they are the ones that govern the price. This isn't the case here. We've got a whole bunch of compute power out in the internet, and people are trying to bid for to sort of lease that compute unit out, and because of that, again, prices are generally going to go down. Maybe not all the time, but again, it's one of those ones. Again, competition drives price, which I quite like the idea of, especially within this. But anyway, so if I just keep going down, we can see that this is where it really appealed to me. So it very much looks as if you could take already existing cloud applications from these sort of Azure ecosystems, AWS ecosystems, and as long as they're containerized, I'm assuming what they mean by that is just through Docker or something like that, you can essentially deploy these containers that contain your applications to this decentralized platform. But what's really interesting is this, again, the serverless sort of approach. I wouldn't say necessarily all apps should be serverless, but there's definitely a sort of use case where serverless sort of applications definitely they tend to, what am I trying to say? They tend to, instead of vertically scaling, which just means that you need just to pay more to basically do more, serverless apps tend to horizontally scale, so therefore they're able to generally spin up more instances, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cost you more, but it's able to process a lot more because it's able to do so much more. Like, it's just a case of if you're expecting this load and you're currently maxing that out, you could spin up more instances of that serverless app, which will then be able to essentially just process more. I can't describe it any better than that personally, but it's, when it comes to pure raw scaling, these serverless apps really stand out. Yeah. Again, we use them in certain instances within some of the work I do commercially. They mostly tend to do fairly trivial things, but again, it's more the ability to horizontally scale when you get hit with quite a large load on the system. So that was good to see that they're focusing on that sort of stuff. Yeah, the rest of the website just sort of goes on. There's some testimonies from fairly. I'm not entirely sure who these people are. I'm not going to pretend to know who these people are, but at the same time, they're relatively decent sort of community posts, just about what Akash has brought to the Cosmos ecosystem, and I tend to agree on a lot of this. They're cost effective. You can see this, and it's powered by people that are willing to provide compute resource, really. Yeah, so that covers that page pretty much. I'll jump on to probably more of a. Yeah, let's jump in here. This is definitely more on the technical side, but I think you'll agree when I say a lot of crypto is very speculative, in the sense of you don't necessarily, as a user, ever interact with it in a sense. A lot of the time, a lot of people are pretty much buying the coin, holding the coin, and then selling the coin. That's pretty much the maximum amount of user engagement a lot of these sort of projects end up getting. What I like to see, specifically from like major potential investments, is again use cases. The fact that anyone with any sort of general software development background can sit in this documentation here, and just via just a simple quick start guide. You can see here we've got macOS instructions, we've got Linux instructions, we've got source code instructions, how to actually get all the code, how to deploy all the code, all that fun stuff. But even just from macOS, you could see it's telling you essentially how to set up pretty much everything. Talks you through all the deployment scripts, talks about all the certificates you need to be able to deploy to the blockchain. It tells you how to set up wallets to then create the deployment. Gives you, again, it's very well documented, and I like to see that, because again, from specifically a programming point of view, it makes the sort of the tedious integration of, if people really want to actually try these things out, they can. In a lot of cases, that's not the case, especially with crypto projects in general. You'll find a very unique subset of people that are able to sort of create general applications for these fairly complex sort of systems. But this straight up sort of informs you know how, which is again a good sign. I like to see that sort of stuff in projects. But what's really got me interested, again, just knowing this industry and knowing its growth. I mean, I've been in the software engineering field now for 4 years. Specifically the cloud computing space. I've been in for 4 years, and when I started back in 2017, again, it's not as if it was like a small industry by any means. It was, cloud computing was very much on the way to becoming the absolute Goliath it is today. But I think back then the industry was roughly worth about maybe, oh God, I don't want to throw numbers out there, but I think it was somewhere between 125 billion to 150 billion. And you could see in 4 years alone, in fact not even 4, 3 years alone, that doubled in size. The industry essentially grew by to a factor of 2. And what's even more crazy is by 2025, in another 4 years, well, not even 4 years from now, it's really best part of like three and a bit years, we're expecting to see this potentially between another 2 to 2.5x. Probably in a worst case situation. Again, there's a lot of companies that require scale, require a lot of compute resource, especially going down the whole, I wouldn't say artificial intelligence, like businesses that require that sort of stuff, but the amount of products that need fairly beefy compute units now, just to be able to do very simple things like suggesting products for users, and a whole plethora of stuff. I mean, it would amaze you the amount of compute resource that goes into some of the simplest of like applications these days online. And because of that, these cloud computing platforms are like the place you go. Like, it's just not economical to create your own sort of server. Not servers, but like it's just not economical to have this sort of hardware that processes this sort of stuff, on site these days. It's just much easier to pay for the resource, really. As much as it's going to cost you a lot more, it's just, again, they deal with the maintenance, so therefore over time it is just a lot cheaper to do, to deal with. But yeah, just again having a look at sort of the general market caps of the entire industry. If I jump back to Emirates right now and jump to assets, you can see that AKT currently has a market cap of 285 million. To put that in perspective, just based on the analysis of just where things are going and where it currently is, as of last year. In terms of last year, AKT currently has a total global market cap of 0.076%. And what's even more crazy, I mean, that was compared to last year's numbers, so it's probably a wee bit higher or lower than that today, but based on 2025's projected sort of market caps for the entire industry, the current sort of valuation puts that as sort of a 0.0346% of the global market. It's a naive approach, and again, I don't like necessarily saying that again all you need is 1% of an industry, because that is a tough ask. But it's one of those ones that shows you how much potential growth there is within these sort of decentralized systems as a whole. What we tend to see, it definitely depends. Like these sort of ecosystems definitely have to evolve in their own way. They have to evolve at their own speed as well. And for a project, this is still in its very early days. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, just thought I would shine some light on it, show you pretty much what I'm investing in inside the Cosmos sort of ecosystem, and just a sort of small update, just on the current assets and holdings within the Cosmos ecosystem. So yeah, as you can see, I'm starting to sort of, I wouldn't say move out of Osmo. Osmo's fantastic, but essentially what I'm doing is just using the sort of rewards that Osmo's giving me on the daily basis to essentially just buy into a whole bunch of assets. I think going forward, I'm probably, as said, going to try and put a lot of the Osmo rewards directly into AQT for now. I think long term, I genuinely think long term, if the project ends up sort of delivering on its promises, which as we've seen, sorry, I completely missed that point as well. They do actually have a roadmap, but if AKT delivers on its promises, I genuinely think that is an incredibly low market cap for specifically cloud computing infrastructure type projects. I mean, realistically, I think we could potentially see somewhere between a 5 and 10x sort of market growth just in, I'm not necessarily saying AKT as a whole, but I think generally D-Cloud application type, infrastructure, I don't see that being less than a $1 billion industry. Right now it is, but again, it's in its early days, and I might be wrong on what I'm about to say next, but I haven't seen anything that looks quite as ready as this to deploy to an actual sort of D-Cloud solution, which is quite nice. But yeah, having a look at the roadmap, you can clearly see that the devs are actively sort of working through this, and there seems to be quite a lot going on, just in general. But yeah, as I say, I just thought I would drop in, have a look through Akash, see what they were about, make people aware, have a wee chat, just generally about the industry as a whole. As I say, being a software dev myself, it's interesting to see these sort of things flourishing, and it's good to see again projects with fairly minimal barriers of entry, especially when it comes to people that are wanting to sort of create apps in decentralized ways. Yeah, so until next time, we will hopefully come back at the end of next week with a small update on just the current holdings. But as you can see right now, getting quite cushy. We're now up to close to $4,000, which is nice. Most of that is again come from just purely Osmo rewards, so if you're not staking Osmo, get staking Osmo. The percentages are dropping quite fast, I'll say that much. At the moment, we are down to... Oh, that's Cosmos. At the moment, we are down to 204%. So that's dropped roughly about... I think it was at 237% around 2.5 to 3 weeks ago, so we're starting to see quite a lot of money flow in here, quite a lot of money getting staked, and therefore the percentages are dropping quite fast. But still plenty to go. As I say, 204% is not a bad yearly return. So yeah, get staking. Let me know in the comments below what you think about AKT, generally what you think about a lot of the Cosmos assets. Again, the more I see just generally about what's going on in the ecosystem, the more I get excited about Cosmos as a whole. I'm going to create a video on Persistence, Persistence 1. Persistence 1 looks really good. That's another project that I'm going to be trying to stack as much as I can. I'm not going to go into detail about what it is right now, but we'll have a chat about that in the next video if that's what people want. So if you want to have a chat about that, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, speak to you later.